is Jacob Graham, and today I'm going to be demoing the app that my partner and I built for the DeveloperWeek 2024 Hackathon. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So our app is an API builder, and so the inspiration for this app is, I was recently working on a project where I had to build a REST API. And throughout the process of building that, I realized that building APIs is an incredibly repetitive task. And so that got me thinking, maybe we could automate that. And so I talked with my partner for this hackathon, and we decided that would be a good project. So we built this app. It's called the Sunrise API Editor. And as you can see right here, we have the home screen. So we'll start by signing in to my account. We'll give that just a minute to log us in. As you can see here, once we are logged in, you see here's our dashboard. And as you can see, I have a few projects in here already. But for this demonstration, I'm going to make a new project. But each of these projects basically represents a database that we have automated the building of an API for. So this might be where a company, like say the XYZ Corporation, has a database for their manufacturing logs or for handling their orders, and they want to be able to access that data in their applications. In order to do that, they need an API. But as I said, building an API is a repetitive and labor-intensive process. So that is where our app comes in. So let's say I have another database that I want to build an API for, and let's say it's the XYZ Corporation's blog. And I'm going to enter a quick description of the project. So the blog for the XYZ Corporation. And here's where it starts to get a little bit interesting. So here we're going to choose what type of database we're going to build the API for. So in this case, for demonstration purposes, we're going to choose SQLite. And then we're going to choose the output API type. So the idea is eventually there would be many different types here. However, for now, the only output type supported is Flask API. So we're just going to choose that. We're going to click to create a project, and we're going to let the app set up and configure our project. So now as you can see, a new project has been created and registered to our account. So you can see some basic details about the project here. There's not much going on right now, but in just a moment, you'll be able to see some changes to the screen. First of all, I'm going to show you the settings tab. So this is where you can edit and update the name, description, database type, and output type of the project. So as you can see, we can edit the name, description, and all the stuff that we edited upon creating the project. But I don't want to change any of that right now. So instead, I'm going to go over to the editor. Now the editor is the screen where we enter information about the database that we want an API built for. So this is how our app knows how to design the API. So for our simple blog database, we're just going to create two tables for demonstration purposes. The first one is going to be a users table. So users table, we're just going to enter a description of it. Users in our blog can be host authors. We're going to enter the table name. We're also going to enter the singular name. The singular name is basically, as it says, the singular version of the name of the entity. So in this case, it's a user, and that's used behind the scenes to generate the API. And now we're going to enter the data schema into the app. So we're going to start by adding the ID column. We're going to note that is the primary key, so we're going to click the check mark right there. And then we're going to add another column. This column is going to be a string called title for the title of the post. And then after adding the title column, we're going to add another column to hold, or sorry, no, not title. This is going to be the name of the user. Sorry, I was a little bit ahead of myself there. And we're going to add another column for the user's email address. And again, this is something that's already in our database. And then lastly, we're going to show a different data type, the Boolean data type, and we're going to say the is admin data type, just as an example of a different data type. So after that, I'm going to click submit to create the entry in our project. We'll give that just a moment to process. Yeah, and now as you can see, the users table has been created. We can click this button to go and edit that data, but instead of doing that, we're going to add our other entity into our project. This entity is going to be called posts. So this is where it's going to be posts in our blog are written by a user. Singular name post. We're going to start again with an ID attribute is a primary key. We're going to have, and this is where title will come. We're going to have a title of the post, string, add another one, another string for the content, the HTML content of the post. And lastly, we're going to do something a little interesting here. We're going to add an author ID column. And this is going to be a foreign key, and this is going to tell us which user wrote the post. So we're going to click it. We're going to mark it as a foreign key. This drop-down will appear. We're going to say it's related to the users table. Then another drop-down will appear where we will choose which attribute it relates to on the users table. In this case, it'll be ID. So after that's done, we're going to click the submit button to create our post entry. And in just a moment, you'll see we have our posts table in our database as well. So now that we're done editing the project and adding tables to it, now we want to build our API. So in order to do that, we're going to click this builds tab, and giving that just a moment to load, we're going to see a listing of all the builds for this particular project. Currently, there are none. So I'm going to click New Project Build, and it's going to use the settings of the project, the database type, and the output type, along with the schema we entered to generate a new API. So giving that just a moment to process, you'll see we have build complete. You can see our build show up here. I'm going to go back to the builds tab. There's another way to reach it. Now you'll notice I can either delete or download the build. In this case, I'm going to download it. I'm going to save it into this pre-prepared folder that I have set up right here. Great. Now I'll kind of show you what I do from there. So as you can see, once I've downloaded that, project, it will appear in this folder, and I'm going to extract it into this folder. You'll see that includes a range of different files. It creates a templates directory, app.py, database.py, schema.py, a requirements file, and a README. So if I click the README, you'll see in my preview window some instructions here. Now these are setup instructions to get the API up and running. And these will be generated for every API our app generates. Anyway, the first step in setting up our API to test to see if it works is to open a text editor, or to open a terminal and a text editor, I should say. And the first step in the case of this Python API is to create the virtual environment holding the requirements for the API. And this is detailed in the readme.txt. Okay, so to start out, we're going to create that virtual environment holding all of our Python dependencies. So to do that, I'm going to type Python -m, just like that. Give that a moment to create our environment. All right, yeah, and once again, all these steps are detailed in this generated readme.txt file. Looks like our environment is created, so now I'm going to activate it with okay, so you see now that our virtual environment is activated. And so my next step is to actually install my requirements. So you notice one of the files that was generated was a requirements.txt file. And this contains all the requirements that our new API needs to run. So it's a simple matter of running a pip install command against that file. See, it's collecting all the dependencies and installing them into our virtual environment. Giving it one moment. But once that's complete, that means that our dependencies are set up and we're ready to move on to the next step. And while that loads, I can actually start the next step. So the other step is to create the environment file holding the database credentials needed for the API to interact with the database. So I'm going to create the environment file, and looking back into the README, if you read this, you'll see that in order to integrate with a SQLite database, which is the database type that we chose for our build, all that's needed to be defined in there is a database file name. So I'm going to go back to this file, and I'm going to say this file name equals, in this case, I'm going to use this example database db.sqlite3. Excuse me. I'll save that. And then you'll notice since the requirement's done installing and this file is set up, I can now actually run the API. All right, you see that our API server is running. So if I return to this screen and refresh this page, you'll see that when I visit my API, I'm taken directly to the API documentation that our application automatically generated. So you see there's documentation for each different type of route in the API, the create route, the get index route, the get a specific instance route, the update route, and the delete route. It gives us the endpoint to send our request to, the type of request to send it to, and the format of the request. So in order to demonstrate this a little bit better, I'm going to use an application called Postman to simulate a real application interacting with this new API. So if you look over here, you'll see I'm going to send a post request to the user's endpoint. This is going to create a new user, and it needs to contain a name and email and an isAdmin value. So I'm just going to add that isAdmin value really quick. I'm going to send that request. Notice we see a response message of record created. This means that we successfully created a record. Now, if I visit this endpoint in my browser. So I'm going to change this to API/users, and if you look at the results that are returned, you'll see that in this case we return an index listing of all users in our database. So we have one user so far, only containing IDs for now, and a quick message letting us know that everything was successful. If I want to get that specific user, I go back and I go back to the API documentation. You'll see that to get a specific user, I just have to append the user ID onto the end of the route. So user/1. You'll see here's all the specific information about the user that we posted from our application. So now, one other thing you may notice is there is a posts attribute here, and this is one of the neatest features of our application. It actually respects relationships that were defined in the dashboard and shows a listing of related models, of related records underneath the user's model. So in this case, an index of posts. But there are no posts written by this user in our database right now. So let's change that. Let's switch over and create an endpoint for posts. Excuse me. Let's create a new post in our database. So if we think back to our schema for posts, we entered that there was a string title. We'll call it post1. There was string content. I'm going to enter some sample content for now, just as an example. And there was an author ID specifying who wrote the post. In this case, we want user 1 to have written the post. So we're going to leave that as a 1. So we're going to click to create that post. You'll see down at the bottom as the result, creation of the post is successful. And if I refresh this user, the ID of the first post that was added, ID 1, is added to this index listing from the author's get method. Now, something else we might want to do is update a record in our database. And the way we do that is by submitting a patch request to the endpoint indicated by the API docs, which in this case would be users/1. So if we look at our users/1 record right now, we'll see this data. Now I'm going to update the email address to be updated@buyer.com. I'm going to click to send that request. You notice record updated, and if I revisit this endpoint, you'll see that the email address is now updated@buyer.com. So now I'm going to visit the last operation is the delete operation. Now if I try to delete this buyer, you'll notice there's a problem. Sorry, not this buyer, this user. Notice there's an error because foreign key constraints failed. So if we want to delete this user, we have to delete both of the posts first. So now that we're done building and interacting with our API, I'm going to return back to our original app, and I'm just going to log back out of my account. Our app also has fully featured security system built in, so obviously users can only access projects that are theirs, and they can only access them when they're logged in. But yeah, other than that, that's a brief sampling of our application. Now obviously our app it was developed in a very short amount of time, so there are of course bugs that we would fix and things that we would change if we had a little bit more time. But overall, I think we're really happy with how this project has turned out. It's a really cool idea, and I'm glad we were able to bring it into reality. So you see, logged back out, right back where we started. Thank you very much for watching and taking the time to look at our app. I hope you like what you see.